Max, it's the first time I've seen you since you were appointed as the new DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions. So I just wanted to say congratulations to you on behalf of Chambers, and it's really great news. It's the most difficult job, arguably, at the moment in law. You're somebody at the top of your profession. You're head of Chambers. You're Silk, and you've been practicing now for some 30 years. Why take this challenge at this particular point?
I think the first thing to say is how incredibly fortunate I am to have a chance to serve in this way for 5 years, starting on the 1st of November this year. Because when you're a criminal lawyer practicing in the criminal courts, with every advice that you write, with every case that you do, you're directly in contact with the criminal justice system in this country. And the role of being DPP, or the head of the CPS, is another form of contact with the criminal justice system. And it was one of my predecessors, Keir Starmer, who wrote on completing his 5-year term that he was pretty sure that the job of DPP was the best job in the criminal justice system. So I guess I'm going to find out whether he was right or wrong about that. But I'm confident that it is an extremely important job, in the sense that every criminal case involves the Crown Prosecution Service. And this is an opportunity, after 31 years now as a case lawyer on individual cases, doing just a handful of cases at a time, for me to try to bring some influence to bear across the whole of the system, to recognise the many, many occasions when things go right, which they do most of the time, and equally, if not more importantly, to try to help as and when things go wrong. And that's what excites me and interests me in the job. I'm ready for the challenge, and I'm looking forward to getting started with the work. 31 years of legal practice means, as everybody at Red Lion Chambers knows, 31 years of self-employment, with all of the freedoms that come with self-employment, even though, as most of us would recognise, the ability to technically go on holiday whenever you feel like it means, for most self-employed barristers, that we take less holiday than those who are employed. So there's going to be a real shift. I'm going to miss so much about the self-employed bar, the team spirit that we have here in Chambers, the wider spirit that the entire criminal bar has, which I've been lucky enough to experience through my time with the Criminal Bar Association, through my time with the South Eastern Circuit, and through my time with the Criminal Bar's charity, the Kalisha Trust. I've thoroughly enjoyed all of that, running alongside all of my casework over 3 decades. And just to finish my answer on the casework, the 24 hours a day absorption in a major case is one of the things that interested me when I came to the bar. It's undoubtedly worked through the 3 decades in which I've practiced, and we all enjoy the challenge of a difficult case, a complex case, throwing ourselves in at the deep end sometimes and working every day of the week. I'm under no illusion that being head of the CPS will be any form of holiday. It'll be every bit as hard work as practicing at the bar, but it will be different. So although I'm very much looking forward to my new community in the CPS, I'm leaving behind a lot of friends. These chambers have been my professional home for 21 years, and everything that has brought me to this point is a credit to this wonderful set of chambers, which I'll be very sad to leave.
Neither of your parents went to university. There's no family background in the legal profession before you went on an open scholarship to Oxford, St Peter's College, on an open scholarship in 1983. Who or what inspired you to have a career in law?
When I was at school, I wasn't sure whether a career in the law was a reality for me. I don't have any family history in the legal profession, and in fact like a lot of people in my generation, neither of my parents had gone to university. So I had a principal interest in history, thought for some time that that was the subject that I was going to read at university, but then converted to thinking about the law, and in 1983 was very lucky to get an open scholarship to St Peter's College, and I read law there from 83 to 86. Although we say to many students today not to worry about reading law as a first degree, but to come to it later, in my case, and at that time, it was sensible to read law. It set me up, gave me a foundation for my career as it's turned out. And the inspiration for coming to the law was always about the bar. 30, 40 years ago, obviously the choice was whether to become a solicitor or a barrister. For me, it was always the bar that interested me. We qualified as common lawyers then, and there was a spread of practice which included crime but was not exclusively focused on crime. But I think it's no secret to say that I was always fired by the notion of advocacy, was always enthused by the role that the criminal advocate plays, either prosecuting or defending, and that was really my interest. So the inspiration was from the social aspect of criminal casework, the feeling that when you pull together the evidence in a criminal case, you're having arguably a more direct and significant impact on people's lives than at any other stage in their life or in any other forum. And therefore the importance of what happens in court can't be overstated. And I wanted to be a part of that, and I wanted to perform that role in a balanced way, sometimes defending and sometimes prosecuting. And by and large, that's what I've been able to achieve over the 3 decades at the bar.
The Kalasha Trust is close to your heart. Please tell us more about its work and why it's so important to you.
I think I've always felt that the legal profession should be representative of the society that it serves. And that means that both prosecutors and those who defend in our criminal courts need to be representative and proportionate. And that, of course, means that diversity and social mobility are of great importance. And whilst I don't represent diversity in many ways, I am at least the product of a family with no legal background, with no prior education at university level. That was important to me. And so when I discovered that the Criminal Bar's charity is named after Michael Kalasha, who was a celebrated chairman of the Criminal Bar Association who died tragically young, I was very interested to try to become involved, was lucky to be invited onto the board and then to become chairman, which I have been for 5 years. And what Kalasha does is to identify and then attract to the bar young people of ability, academic, intellectual ability, who perhaps would never think of the bar. They might not even think of going to a Russell Group university because not many of their fellow students do that. They certainly wouldn't think of coming to the bar, and in making that difficult journey to the bar might not have the contacts or indeed the funds to make the journey. And Kalasha comes in that regard in a whole host of ways, and we have developed, particularly over recent years, a schools program which starts at primary school age, comes up through secondary education and through university, and through funding in some respects and mentoring in a whole host of other respects, we try to support those who lack the contacts and the financial means, but who are absolutely the sort of people who we should have as representatives for prosecution and defence in our courts. And I've been very proud and happy to be part of the Kalasha Trust for a handful of years now.
Just following on from that, Max, how will you ensure that the CPS reflects the community it serves at the very highest levels?
Well, I think that any arm of the civil service needs to be, and frankly, to my observation, is representative. And so I don't doubt that I will find diversity and social mobility within the ranks of the Crown Prosecution Service, and I don't doubt that I will find a service that is also reaching out to the community whom it serves. And for that matter, I know that some of the community engagement work that I've undertaken as independent review of terrorism legislation is mirrored, at least in part, by community conversations that have been happening up and down the country at chief prosecutor level, meaning that prosecutors are coming into communities to explain the work of the CPS. That strikes me as extremely sensible and necessary, and I will look forward to any opportunity to make sure that that continues.
You've said before that the killing of Damilola Taylor and the successful prosecution that you were involved with left a lasting impression on you. And Max, you spoke movingly in the past how his Nigerian parents had sent him to London to be schooled in London, thinking he would be safer here. Of course, the situation with knife crime in London is arguably worse now than it was then. Are there any lessons from that case that you think can help us deal with this epidemic?
I think that the first thing I should say is that as an advocate, even in some of the most significant or celebrated cases of a year or a decade, you need to recognise you're only playing a small part in what is often a tragic story. I was on the prosecution team in the second set of prosecutions in relation to the killing of Damilola Taylor, and it was hard work over a course of 2 years to ensure that justice was finally served. I was certainly proud to do that. Don't claim any personal credit. I was merely a cog in the wheel that managed to conclude that particular journey. But undoubtedly that was one of the cases, if not the case, that has stayed with me in a fairly long career, where I've been involved in more homicide cases than I've ever counted, prosecuting some, defending others, and it is a depressing fact that in London in particular, in the 21st century, our courts, principally the Central Criminal Court, are dealing with deaths through homicide of young people, not always, but very often involving the use of knives. That is why our sentencing culture has been strengthened to deal with the possession of knives. That is why the police work as hard as they do to try to intercede from the point of view of public safety and from the point of view of simply trying to stop the loss of life. It's not for me to suggest what further policing solutions there might be, though we've heard both the Mayor of London and the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Service making their intentions very clear. And in its way, the Crown Prosecution Service is there to ensure a fair but robust and hard-working response to these sort of cases. That is one of the functions of the Treasury Council system, though by no means their only function. That is the daily diet, sadly, of so many of the Central Criminal Court courtrooms, and undoubtedly it's a significant feature of the homicide work of the Crown Prosecution Service. I'm not going to predict what future policy considerations they should be, but undoubtedly it is a matter of importance for the CPS to make sure that we play our part in serving justice in those cases.
Another case that's had a huge impact on British culture and the law in England and Wales was the death of Stephen Lawrence and his murder. And of course the police were heavily criticised in that case, and most notably for institutionalised racism. 25 years on, are there any lessons still to be learnt from the Stephen Lawrence case and his murder?
Well, I need to emphasise that none of the legal proceedings around the murder of Stephen Lawrence 25 years ago have involved me, so I've been an observer and not a participant. But over time, because of the reports around that appalling crime and all of the events that have happened, more and more within the criminal justice system have been brought to focus on perhaps some of the underlying issues that a crime like that involves. And of course I mean racism by that, I mean our attitude towards a diverse culture and community. And actually that is not so different to the diversity that we find within terrorism offences, which I've been reviewing as independent reviewer since March of last year. And I've noted over the last 18 months the increasing balance in terms of police investigation and particularly arrests, where it's not just international terrorism, so-called, but it's also domestic extremism, which includes extreme right-wing activity, which has been a focus of policing and successful investigation, arrest and conviction. And that balance in the use of the counter-terrorism legislation is mirrored by the balance in the use of homicide in other serious violence investigations, where we, the authorities involved, have to go wherever the crime dictates. I think at a practitioner level, the other factor that cases like the murder of Stephen Lawrence have brought to bear is that 30 or so years ago, a criminal barrister like me simply went to court. Now that's a job on its own, which can involve 24 hours a day. But the skill set of the criminal barrister over the last decade has been something which I think we've come to realise is a little more broad in its application than simply going to court to prosecute or defend. And so when we do have public inquiries, when we do have inquests in relation to very significant criminal activity, you should expect to find criminal barristers coming out of the courtroom and playing their part. And that has been part of the journey of Red Lion Chambers, where over the last 10 or so years, we've found increasing numbers of senior and junior practitioners who've become go-to individuals to conduct advocacy in the glare of the spotlight, which is outside the courtroom, but which is enormously important in terms of the consequences of a significant crime or a significant event. We're seeing that still today in the aftermath of the major terrorist atrocities of 2017 and of course the awful fire at Grenfell Tower more than a year ago. What I've found particularly interesting is the portable skills that criminal barristers possess, which make them useful beyond the confines of a courtroom. It's been a small part of my career, but looking forward, I think is going to be a major part of the career of those who are at the top of the tree in terms of the criminal bar, namely the members of Red Lion Chambers, and I wish them luck.
A standout feature of your time as independent reviewer is your willingness to go into the community, to listen, to engage before formulating your opinion. I know as a junior to you that was very much a feature of the way that you led a prosecution I was involved with at trial with you, where you listened to people's views, took them on board, and then formulated your own opinions. Will that personal community engagement continue as DPP, or does the nature of that role make it impossible?
Well, I can't speak for the Crown Prosecution Service until I become the head of the service, which doesn't happen as a matter of contract until the 1st of November. But to take the example from my time as independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, the first question that the then Home Secretary asked me at our first meeting after appointment was whether I regarded the impact of the legislation as being within remit, within my brief. It was an open question to which my firm answer was yes, I do think that the impact of our legislation is something that I should be considering if you're asking me to review that legislation. And that really set the mark for me as an experienced former counter-terrorism prosecutor to really try to have a much broader conversation in terms of the national perception at a community level of our legislation, and therefore the impact that the community feels following the laws which Parliament pass from time to time. And I've done everything that I can to balance my appreciation. I've banked and taken for granted my knowledge from a prosecutor's perspective, my relationships within counter-terrorism policing, and I've tried to go as far and wide as possible in this country and actually beyond this country on a comparative basis to have conversations about the impact of the legislation. In that sense, the impact of criminal legislation far more broadly than counter-terrorism is part of what the Crown Prosecution Service is there to serve. And that is why I'm sure that as DPP I will not be spending my working week simply behind a desk in London any more than I did as independent reviewer. Where I go, who I see is a matter that is hard to predict, but I do regard the impact of our laws as something which we have to bear carefully in mind and to watch at all times.
As head of chambers and as the independent reviewer, you engaged with users of Twitter. Will that continue as DPP?
I've noticed that no previous DPP has had a Twitter account, although there's a very active Twitter account with many thousands of followers, which the Crown Prosecution Service run. My intention is to leave open and active my own personal Twitter account. At the moment I have two. The independent reviewer account will be mothballed for my successor to pick up whenever he or she is appointed, but my personal account I intend to keep open. I can't pretend that I'll be able to use it with very great frequency, but social media is part of the way that we talk to each other in this country now, is part of the way that we reflect our views, and so I do intend to maintain a Twitter account. The fact that I'm the first is no particular accolade, but it demonstrates how social media has moved on in very recent years, and I think that time has come.
You said when appointed as DPP, this is a challenging time for the CPS with the rise in complex cases and negative publicity about its handling of disclosure in some cases. You added, I have seen firsthand the sterling work of the CPS and I'm determined to restore public trust in all of its work. Are you able to say anything more about these challenging times, your own experience of the CPS to date, and your ambition for the organisation?
I think that all I can say as I'm on the brink of starting the job of DPP is that I meant what I said in July about working as hard as I can to restore confidence and to restore trust in the Crown Prosecution Service. That is my intention, will be my constant work throughout the 5 years in office, and I hope that by the end of that time the Crown Prosecution Service will be seen for what it is, which is a highly successful organisation which nonetheless works very hard to put things right on those occasions when something goes wrong.
In your time at the Independent Bar, in particular as head of the South Eastern Circuit and the CBA, you're instrumental with notable others for highlighting the importance of the Independent Bar to the criminal justice system and the underfunding of advocates. Is there a role for the Independent Bar in your vision for the CPS and prosecutions in England and Wales?
There's a very clear partnership between the Crown Prosecution Service, our national prosecuting authority, and the Independent Bar. Whether you're talking about the current director, the one before that, or whether you're looking at me as the incoming director, we can all be absolutely clear that the CPS has in the past, is now, and will continue to rely on the external profession, the Independent Bar, for a very substantial portion of its courtroom advocacy. That is in partnership with the CPS because there is some extremely good advocacy that is to be found from those already full-time employed by the CPS, namely the Crown Advocates. And I know as a practitioner that when I go to individual court centres, when I talk to resident judges, many of them will say what a good service they're receiving by the senior Crown Advocate who is stationed, in effect, in that court centre. So Crown Advocates needn't have anything to fear, nor need the independent bar have anything to fear. We need each other in order to service the huge number of criminal prosecutions that are mounted every year, and that is the way forward.
What advice would you give to young people entering the profession?
What I'd say is the legal profession at all levels needs good people. It needs clever, talented, dedicated advisors and advocates. And in particular, because it's the biggest component of the legal system, the criminal bar and the Crown Prosecution Service need lawyers to come forward. There is absolutely a secure future, both at the criminal bar and within the Crown Prosecution Service. I think the route to the professions has changed significantly over the last decade to a decade and a half. I think that following the many reports on pathways to the profession, including the Clementi report, which I often single out, sensible advice has been given about young people taking their time before they launch into the profession, about securing the best academic results that they can during secondary and tertiary education, and often about gaining relevant experience through charity work, non-governmental organisations, or even employed work before they take the plunge into the legal profession and principally the bar. But having done all of that, there is a vibrant career, and coming to a leading set such as Red Lion Chambers, what you find is that there are income streams and work streams that are far more diverse than I suspect university lecturers and tutors would have students believe. It is a broad practice. There are those who go to court every week of the year. There are those who go to court very infrequently because they're engaged in other strands of work. So there's much to choose from if you come to the criminal bar. You get the best education that you can, starting with the academic subject that interests you most, and then gradually hone that down to a dedication to come to the criminal bar, and above all, come to the best set that you can. And if you can get into Red Lion Chambers, you're very lucky indeed.
As a fellow Northerner, we both know how London-centric England and Wales can be perceived to be. We last worked on a case outside London together, and we saw firsthand the dedication and excellent work of the CPS team that we worked with. How will you bring what is a truly national organisation together?
Well, it doesn't matter where you are around the country, it's the decision making and the accuracy of your work that counts. I'm absolutely clear that whether you're in the northeast or the southwest or all places in between, there are extremely good and dedicated lawyers at all levels within the CPS, just as there are good and dedicated members of the bar in all of those locations. Confidence in your decision making, knowing that you're doing the right thing by the case that is on your desk, those are the hallmarks of success. Frankly, not much more need be done than recognise all of the positive work to ensure that confidence is imbued in the service. All I can say is that I may be the head of the CPS working from a desk in London. You can expect to see me as soon as possible in all 19 of those locations to say hello and to find out the work that's being done, and I'm sure being done extremely well.
If we were sat here at the end of your time as the DPP, Max, how should we judge your success?
It's very difficult for me to say how I should be judged after 5 years. I will hope to make good on my original intentions, which are to restore confidence and to build trust. That is what I intend to do, but it's for other people to judge whether I'm successful in that.
Max, members of the public who don't know you may still recognise you from the telly. You appeared last year in a TV drama documentary called The Trial, in which you played yourself. There were real barristers involved in it, you for the prosecution, others for the defence, and a real judge looking at the workings of the trial process and the jury system. To my mind, legal dramas and documentaries seem to be important for the public perception of the legal profession. Do you think popular TV, film and drama can break down barriers with the public and engage them with addressing misconceptions?
I think it's amazing how much interest there is in the criminal justice system from the population in general. I think it's astounding that the work that we do in court and advising in cases is of such interest, but we can tell from legal dramas and even legal documentaries that there's an unending appetite to watch these programs. I was one of a number of lawyers and other legal professionals who saw a purpose in the Channel 4 docudrama Murder, A Trial in the Family, which we made in 2016 and was screened in 2017. The value that we saw was in trying to show the system as it really works, or as close as possible to how it really works, given that the law forbids having cameras in live courtroom trials. My perception was that, imperfections and all, the Channel 4 series got pretty close to showing what we actually do in court day in, day out. Of course, it had to be a fictional trial, but it was pretty close to what we do. And I was very pleased by the positive reaction to that series. And wearing my hat as chairman of the Kalischer Trust, I've been particularly pleased at the number of young people who've come forward to say, I watched that series, I was thinking about the legal profession, I'm thinking about it even more seriously now. So we've clearly served a purpose in encouraging the next generation. So the accessibility of what we do sometimes is down to coverage in print, in the media generally, and of course on screen. I think we have to look at all of that coverage as a recognition of the importance of what we do. It's an accolade for the criminal justice system that it seems to bring about so much interest. But I would say that you can't simply look at the TV and regard everything as 100% accurate and truthful. There's no substitute for actually going into a courtroom, which is the first thing that I say when people come forward and say, I'm thinking about the profession. Then the answer is, well, you should look for a short-term placement. We call them mini pupilages. Come to Red Lion Chambers and we'll show you what it's like in court.
If there was a fictional show about the DPP, who would play you?
I wouldn't even presume to think that there'd be any interest in anyone portraying the DPP. I'm not sure that it's ever been done before. So I don't think I have an answer on who it would be. All I'd say is that despite some media interest, I'm not the same person as Harry Hill. I'm not related to him, although in fact we do have mutual friends.
If you didn't practice as a lawyer, what would Max Hill, QC, Director of Public Prosecutions, be doing now?
It's so hard, isn't it, after 31 years to rewind the clock and work out where I would have gone. If I hadn't studied law, I would have studied history. I've had an abiding interest in reading history. It isn't a vocational degree, which is why I transferred my thoughts to law. But that was certainly the academic subject that interested me most at school. Funnily enough, had I not been very lucky to win a scholarship to Oxford for the law degree that I took, I would have taken a place that was on offer for a 4-year degree of law with German at King's College London. That was in the early 80s, And I sometimes wonder what might have happened if I'd pursued comparative law all those years ago. There are lots of people who do now and who become European lawyers or operating in all sorts of jurisdictions. So I suppose my answer to the question is that if I wasn't where I am now and had things fallen slightly differently, I might have been in the early generation of European lawyers, and that would have been, I'm sure, extremely fulfilling career. As it is, I've been domestic England only lawyer until very recently, when the independent review work has allowed me to look more broadly, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
Now, I'm going to beat Desert Island Discs to this. What was your favourite book?
I find it hard to say what my favourite book is. I think that I try to read fairly broadly. I don't read legal textbooks at night, over the weekend, or on holiday. I do read fiction, but I'm happy to share with you that my summer reading for 2018 was what is generally regarded as the best English translation of the Quran, which I read from cover to cover over 2 weeks on holiday in Turkey this year. And that seemed to me to be relevant to the work that I'm doing as independent reviewer, and frankly, for anybody, whether religious or not, spending some time concentrating on what the peaceful, mainstream, major religions of the world have to say is not time wasted. So I enjoyed that.
Max, it just remains for me to say thank you for all that you've done for Chambers. In fact, thank you for all that you've done for the bar over many, many years of service. You go with our very best wishes for your future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.